Welcome back. I hope that the self-reflection activity was useful in thinking about how you can apply needs assessments, interviews, and surveys within your own organization. I want to talk a little bit more about other tools that we also commonly use in a needs assessment. We'll start with task analysis. So a task analysis is simply a process that we use to identify what results are currently being accomplished and how are the tasks being done to accomplish those results. Within that, then, we can look at ways to improve current performance in order to move it closer to the desired performance. We can also look at what are the obstacles preventing performance in the current system, as well as what are some of the causes of other issues that may be leading us away from the results that we really want to accomplish. A task analysis is very useful as a point of comparison to other data collection techniques as well. So you may hear something in a needs assessment interview that leads you to conduct a task analysis to better understand what is really taking place. We conduct task analysis using tools at the same time. So during your task analysis, you may do interviews, focus groups, you may conduct a survey, and you'll probably observe a lot of performance, depending on the task that's being analyzed. We'll talk about 4 different types of task analysis that you'll probably use in a needs assessment. The first type of task analysis is a hierarchical task analysis. It identifies the component steps that are necessary for completing a task, and at the same time, it identifies their hierarchy or sequencing of the relationships between the tasks that must be done. A type of task that you would commonly do a hierarchical task analysis for would be things such as how to complete a contractual form, where there's a series of steps and one must be done before another one can be done. A second type of task analysis that we commonly use is the if-then task analysis. This helps us determine important decision steps within a process. It's very good for documenting tasks that involve a lot of expert decisions or behaviors that are not easily observed. So for example, you might use an if-then task analysis if you're studying how do people actually schedule conference rooms for multiple or concurrent meetings, or for how do you apply statistical analysis methods to a data set. There are lots of questions, and depending on how those questions are answered, it may take you down a different process path. Each of those questions we put in as a diamond within our task analysis framework, so we can understand what are those decision points. A third type of task analysis is a model-based task analysis. We use model-based task analysis often when the task being reviewed is vague or difficult to define, such as the topic of leadership. We can then work with people who are demonstrating the desired behaviors to understand what are the models or heuristics that they're applying in order to perform as desired. So for example, we may use a model-based task analysis method to see how project managers communicate with clients in their country. The fourth type of task analysis method that we frequently use in needs assessment is the cognitive task analysis. And this focuses on the psychological processes that people use when completing a task or making a decision. It often combines multiple other types of task analysis together as well. So within a cognitive task analysis, you may use the if and then task analysis method or the model method at the same time. You would want to use a cognitive task analysis, for example, if you are trying to determine how a manager assesses their staff during an annual performance review, or if you're trying to look at how medical conditions are diagnosed based on the symptoms and/or the patient self-reports. In these cases, we want to know about the cognitive processes that the expert performers are using in order to guide their decisions. All 4 types of task analysis can be of great value as you try to analyze what are the needs, what are the causes of those needs, and what are the relationships between those as we start to build towards making recommendations about what to do in order to close those gaps in results. Each of these data collection tools that we've been talking about in this lecture create data for us. A lot of this data is often qualitative. So I want to talk just for a moment about 2 different approaches you can take to analyzing qualitative data. So when you have qualitative data, you can either do what we call inductive data analysis, or you can do deductive data analysis. Both approaches can be very reliable and valid for producing useful results, but they're very different, and you'll have to make decisions about which one makes the most sense given the data that you have available. So let's say you've done several surveys and you've had open response items, and you have probably a couple hundred responses to those items. So you have 30 or 40 pages of data that is qualitative in nature. How are you going to analyze that data? From an inductive data analysis approach, you would take the raw data, those statements, those answers to the survey questions, and you would read them and start to look at them and look for trends or themes that might appear. Did lots of people talk about a particular issue? Were some issues that you anticipated not discussed at all within the responses? And within that then, you're identifying the themes that came out of the data. This is in opposition to then a deductive data analysis approach, where within a deductive approach, you take a framework that you have and you sort each of the responses into that framework. So you may think, based on theory, experience, research literature, or other sources, that responses to the question should fall into 10 different categories. Then what you do is you take those 30 responses, or 300 responses, depending on how many you have, and you sort each of them into the appropriate category. So maybe responses 25, 36, 74, and 99, and 150 all are about the conditions of roads. You would take those 6 or 8 responses and you would put them together and say these are conditions of road responses. In deductive qualitative data analysis, you're using a framework that's already existing to sort the data. As you can see, this is quite different than the inductive, where we didn't have a framework in mind, but rather the framework developed out of the responses that we got. Again, both can be very effective, but you have to make wise decisions about which one to use and when, and you have to make sure that you do it in the correct way to guide your needs assessment as you go forward. Which takes us back to my boys again. So as we started out in lecture 1, my kids love to make statements like, "We need new bikes." From a needs assessment perspective, the question then becomes, where are you trying to go and why? So we're trying to figure out what results they're trying to accomplish and why they want to accomplish those, because that will help us define what the need actually is. Going back to lecture 1, we want to remember that a need is a gap in results where its satisfaction or partial satisfaction is necessary in order to accomplish a second gap in results, or a closure in that second gap in results. Likewise, if we hear statements like, "We need learning on this topic," or "We've decided that they need training on another topic," this leads us to ask, what is it that we want them to do differently? What is the behavior change we're looking for? And why do we want that? With this in mind, we can then ask really useful needs assessment questions. As we start to have answers to those needs assessment questions, we're then better understanding what are results that have to be accomplished. And we can start looking at what types of solutions are going to help take us there in order to accomplish those significant results going forward. Professor John Wedman at the University of Missouri came up with what he calls the performance pyramid model, and this provides us with an excellent tool for understanding how results actually get accomplished within our organizations. As you'll see in the model, at the top he has significant results. This is the closure and needs that we're looking for. Below that then, within the pyramid, he has several factors that are necessary in order to accomplish significant results. He has performance capacity. Do we have the right people? Do they have the right capacity to perform what we've asked them to perform? He has motivation and self-concept. Are they motivated to perform? Do they have confidence that they can perform? In the pyramid, he has knowledge and skills. And this is what we typically do in training and learning programs. We build knowledge and skills. It is typically a necessary component of getting results, but it is not going to accomplish results unto itself. It has to be complemented with these other components of the pyramid. He included expectations and feedback, which is always critical. We have to know what performance is expected of us, and we have to get timely feedback as to whether or not we're performing adequately. We do this then within environments and with tools that are available to us. So that is the fifth part of his pyramid. And then lastly, and all important, we must consider what are the incentives, rewards, and recognitions that support performance. Incentives are the things that we do before we perform, or the things that we use to motivate us before we perform. Rewards and recognitions are the things that happen after performance. So you get rewarded or recognized for performance that you've already accomplished. Of course, this happens within an organizational culture. Does the culture of the organization support accomplishing the results that the organization has said it wants to achieve? And it requires resources, vision, and mission in order to support what happens within the institution. He also adds an element of the continual monitoring. So we should always be monitoring this system. So we can see if the incentives are dragging our performance down, we can make changes there. Or if new knowledge or skills are required in order to get results, we can make changes there. By taking his framework then, we can start to break apart and see what types of activities are useful within each of these categories. For learning design, we often focus on the skills and knowledge that are necessary to accomplish results. And we have many tools that we can then use to achieve those results. So we can do traditional training, we can do e-learning, we can do on-the-job training, knowledge management, job aid, and the list goes on and on. Similarly, within incentives, rewards, and recognition, there are many options that we have available to us. Expectations and feedback is exactly the same. As you can see, the menu gets very long of things that we can do to actually improve performance and accomplish the results that we want to accomplish. It's therefore our job as people conducting needs assessments to know about these options and to make recommendations about which ones will be most efficient and effective at accomplishing desired results. So just because we've always designed e-learning, we don't want to assume that e-learning is the solution that's going to accomplish the results best. We may have to look at other opportunities to say, maybe it's actually a job aid in this instance that will achieve the results we're looking to achieve, especially if we add more information on what are the incentives, we provide clearer details about what are the expectations, and we create new tools and environments to support that performance. So now we're looking at a complete system of performance rather than just developing a single solution that we had in mind from the beginning, such as training or e-learning. As we start to look at these options, we can then use tools like multi-criteria analysis. This is an engineering approach to making decisions, where we can start to look at what are each of our options and list them as rows. In the example on the screen, you can see we have 6 different options: Project 1, Project 2, Project 3, and so forth. You can consider each of these to be a different way of accomplishing the results that are important in your organization. Across the top, we can then list what are the criteria that are important to deciding which one of these is the best choice. Cost may be a factor, how fast it can be done, the number of people impacted. All of these could be the criteria by which you judge each of your options. You can then set about ranking each of these through using an assessment process. Does Project 1, can it be done fast enough? Will it have broad enough impact? As you assign numbers to each of these, you're starting to see what their priorities are in relation to each other. Which one of your alternatives is going to give you the best chance at getting the desired results you want to accomplish? And again, it's not that we want to ignore any of the elements within the performance pyramid. All of those elements must be there in order to get the results we really want to accomplish. So often, learning through the development of knowledge and skills is an important component, but it's obviously not the only component as we think about the performance pyramid. And this brings me back to my boys again. As you'll recall in Lecture 1, they like to say things like, "We need new bikes." With a better understanding of needs now, I would encourage them to be more clear about what the need actually is. So they might say something along the lines of, "Our need is to reduce the time required to get to the playground from 10 minutes to 3 minutes. With this information in mind, we can then look at what the options are. We can look at bikes, we could look at maybe taking the bus, or we could look at even just walking. So we have options available to us that we should consider. Now in the end, they probably will say, "We really want new bikes." And I'll probably break down and buy them new bikes. And that's not bad. Not all decisions have to be made on objective data and a clear knowledge of what is the need. Sometimes we really just want something, and we can make decisions on those wants. What's important, though, is that we don't mix them up with what are the needs. We have to have a process in place to differentiate what is the need from what is the want. And that's what a needs assessment can do for us. And this then can take us into better learning design. By better understanding what are the needs, what are those gaps in results, and how those are then produced through performance of individuals and groups, and using the Wedman Performance Pyramid, we can see the different factors that will lead to accomplishing those results. We can have a very clear picture of what it is that our learning is setting out to achieve. And that is critical to designing quality learning. In order to design good learning and to make good decisions about what should go into that learning, we have to have a clear understanding of what it is we're trying to accomplish. What results are we trying to achieve? Let's conclude Lecture 3 with another self-reflection activity. For this self-reflection activity, I want you to again write down a need within your organization. As before, it can be a need that you've been using for this other activities, or it can be a new need that you're just now thinking about. Whatever it is, think about it in terms of a gap in results, where you have a current level of performance and you have a desired level of performance. And what I want you to do is to ask yourself, which of the following are contributing to that gap in performance? Is it that there is a lack of knowledge and skills? Do people not know or have the skills to do what it is you're asking them to do to get the results? Are there inappropriate incentives? Are the incentives asking people to do something different than what you really want them to do? Are there clear expectations? Is there feedback? What is the motivation level? We'll use the performance pyramid as our guide, and we'll look at each of the factors to see which ones are contributing to the current level of results. Based on this, then you can start to make recommendations about what activities would address these discrepancies. So if it's a lack of knowledge or skills, you may consider training, job aids, or one of the other options from the menu provided earlier. If it's the incentives, then you can look at other options as well. You will probably end up finding many solutions to the types of performance problems you're finding in your organization. This activity will conclude Lecture 3 and the Discovering Needs e-learning course. I hope this has been a useful introduction to needs assessment. Don't forget, there are case exercises to go along with the course that will help you apply what you've learned. There's also quizzes that can be used to test to make sure you've acquired the basic key concepts out of the course. And lastly, there are many resources available that can guide your practice as you go forward conducting needs assessments within your organization. Thank you very much.